So what I wanted to do in my presentation this morning is to really give some credence to the title of this talk that was put together working with Nick as I was describing what I was doing within Amgen, within our process development data strategy to really provide digital connectivity and digital flow across our labs. And in doing so, to think about, the environment that we're in, the landscape, the internal business drivers, but also the external business environment, and really the technology environment in which we're operating today, and what we can tell about the future, and being ready for the future in the areas where at least we see hard trends that we know we want to capitalize and take advantage of. So in addition to that, as an active contributor to the Allotrope Foundation, I wanted to try in the presentation to address some of the questions that we heard yesterday, some of the questions maybe we didn't hear that would be in your mind, in terms of what the framework actually is and tangibly, how can you use it and leverage it, and how can it be a component of the digital strategy of your businesses. So I always like to sort of make sure that as we talk about silos of data, within our companies and our organizations, we also don't have siloed thinking within our own heads as we put together strategies. So what I wanted to do is to start with looking at the 21st century and really what we see in the 21st century very early on. And what we see is an unprecedented convergence of scientific disciplines. We see an exponential growth in the breadth of technologies, in the introduction of game-changing technologies. And we see a convergence across industries in terms of sharing ideas, being fast followers, and leveraging the tools of one industry and applying it into another. We similarly see a phenomenal convergence of disciplines. When I look at human therapeutic development and I look at the business Amgen is in, we see a convergence of the disciplines of science, of physics, chemistry, engineering, math. And when you look at biology and how that's transformed the development of human medicine with genetic information towards personalized medicine, this is an opportunity that we need to be prepared for, and an opportunity that as scientists we really need to seize. So we see this convergence of disciplines, and we see this convergence in sharing across industries, and we see this exponential growth as well of our capability to generate data. And some of the things that we see get us to perhaps look a little bit further into the future as to what's possible. And when you look at the concept of the Industrial Revolution, and you look at motors and machinery, and you work out that now machines are at the molecular level where an acid or base transaction can give you an up-down motion similar to a pump. And you look at the ability to bring wearable devices to actually look at your physiology and response to medicines through a contact lens such as developed by Google's prototype. You realize that there's something happening here that's happening at a velocity that we need to be ready on, and we need to be ready to capitalize on. So when you look at our industry and you look at some of the things that were described yesterday around our challenges and our problems, then it's interesting to look at the perspective of what can be achieved by really thinking about data centricity, by thinking about digital, and thinking about the concepts of the digital twin and the human interface to that digital world. So I chose two examples by design that were different, and I want us to think about how we can translate these into the laboratory landscape. So what you see in the top sides is you see the Tesla Model X car. So that car was built with a digital strategy in mind. When that car autopilots, it's using a digital twin of the outside world that it's navigating. And it's doing that and computing in real time, such that it can actually drive safely and effectively at speeds of 5 miles an hour in congested traffic, or at speeds of 100 miles an hour on the highway. So if you think of the processing and compute power that that's using, you think of the digital environment of the twin that is informing those calculations on board in less than a second in order to achieve that outcome. Let's think about how that digital strategy has enabled transformation in the automotive industry. If you look at the bottom slide, what you see is two concepts. The first is providing a user interface that allows people to interact with a digital world around logistics. Who would have thought people would be excited to come home and log onto a web page and interact with a powerhouse of logistics and supply chain? That's exactly what the Amazon marketplace interface is. The second thing that it is, it's an unparalleled platform for data analytics and semantic annotation of everything that's available on that site for purchase that allows it to suggest to you, it has AI built in. It's suggesting to you what you might like to purchase next. It's finding near neighbors around your interests, and it's putting them front and center for you. And then on the back end, that same strategy is being used with the supply chain logistics around the warehouse. And then recently, they brought the next generation of interface to us, where they allowed you to voice activate the request and the supply chain. And to do it in a way that's very approachable, such that your 4-year-old can run up massive bills on your credit card by talking to Alexa in a way they could never have completed a transaction on a web portal page. So let's bear that in mind when we think about what we're trying to achieve within our digital strategy of the labs. So within the laboratories, our landscape is primed for transformation. And there are a number of reasons for that. The first is the business urgency and drivers of our reality. The need for manufacturing flexibility. The need to be able to have manufacturing across a global supply chain. The fact that we need shorter cycle times, we need lower costs. We have an evolving regulatory environment, and all of this needs to interoperate, and we need to be competitive, and we need to innovate in this environment. We actually are at a point in time where the costs of technology are going down at an amazing rate. What you see here is the price of genomic analysis, which has gone from being hundreds of thousands of dollars to less than $1,000 for a single genome analysis of a human. That cost lowering then makes that data available. That data being available now allows us to leverage and gain insights from individual genetic information that informs the development of personalized medicine. So access to data at an unparalleled velocity with high integrity is driving innovation in the development of medicines. Additionally to that, we have, and we heard yesterday, that we're conservative. That GMP and regulations are constraints. But what's interesting is that the regulatory agencies are encouraging us to use new technologies. They want us to be innovative. They want us to be data-centric. So some of the things that we think are constraints, maybe it's more in our minds than in reality. And so how can we think about that and leverage that? And the other thing is, if you look at the word cloud, is we need data. There's a lot of it, but we need integrity with that data. And the cost of data integrity today, with all of the manual transcription, is unbelievably high for our industry, and it's not sustainable. So we talk about data, and there's the 4 V's of data that everyone is familiar with. So we know about volume of data, that's growing. Gigabytes, petabytes, zettabytes. So we know data is growing. We know the velocity of data. In fact, we demand data to be instantaneous in the way that we conduct our lives outside of our jobs and our industries. So we know that we need data velocity to increase. Variety has never been greater. New technologies, new instruments, new ways of actually accessing data and bringing it to the decision table. But we know the veracity of that data is critical, because lack of data integrity and lack of veracity leads to poor decision making, poor science, and poor conclusions. And the one thing that I think is missing from this 4 V's, I think we need 5 V's of data, because the piece that's missing is the value. Because if we have data but it doesn't have value, then really, what's the point of the data? And one of the problems and challenges we have to solve for is we have a lot of data that is at a very low value because of all of the contextualized information that we're missing. Now, some good things came out of big data, and what came out of big data was some IT technologies and capabilities. So technologies around cloud computing, technologies around things like Hadoop and the data lake, technologies around data analytics, lower costs of data storage, higher compute power. So big data gave us technologies, but it didn't give us all of the solution. So the solution comes from taking big data and actually making big data smart data, because the smart data is where the intelligence is. So the semantic model gives us a foundation of results with context that then allows us to go from the bottom of the value chain where we have data with limited connectivity to the top of the value chain where we basically have insights, we have connectivity, and we have learning, and we have knowledge. So we're using the data to advance. Now I want to come back to reality. That's all very exciting. That looks great. So, I'm on the train, right? It's the bullet train. But I just want to look at where we've come from and how far we've actually got. So this is basically scientific collaboration and data sharing in the 1800s. This is Michael Faraday giving a public lecture in 1855 at the Royal Institution. Today, as scientists, we still use public lectures to communicate, forums such as this meeting. So tick, that's still present. Manual documentation of experiments, written by hand, sent by mail, 6 weeks by ship from the United Kingdom to the USA. Communication around science and data. We have publications reviewed in scientific journals. We still have publications in peer-reviewed journals. What we have is we basically have a paper process to put a lot of that information into an e-paper process that then goes into a scientific journal. So we've taken paper and put it to e-paper, but we haven't really done much more than that. So what is the status quo in our laboratories in 2018? In the majority of cases, it's not very pretty. So what I'm going to start to do now is I'm going to start to weave in the concepts of the Amgen project and our approach to basically transforming our data environment, and the Allotrope organization and how we've leveraged that foundation and the collaboration and the technology to really progress our own digital strategy at Amgen. What you see on the left-hand side is a typical analytical workflow in a lab, from sample to result. What you also see is as you go through the workflow, you see you're acquiring information around the sample, the metadata, the blocks of metadata that lie underneath the workflow steps. But what you also see is there are a few black blocks across that metadata. And those black blocks are dark data. It was recorded incorrectly, it was never recorded, it's missing. You can see it's a cumulative effect. In the laboratories today, we actually have high manual transcription rates. We mostly use business solutions such as Excel and Word to document our science in many cases, in many parts of the data life cycle. We have a lot of legacy architecture that's brittle and rigid. We have a very low level of interoperability, and it's very expensive to life cycle our technology. So if we look at our scientists, we look at our highly educated, highly capable scientists, and we say, what do they spend their time doing? They spend more than 60% of their time actually finding and assembling the data, adding the missing context, the missing pieces, in order to actually do what they want to do, which is to do the analysis, to get the results, and to get the insights, and to progress the science. So clearly, we need to do something about this. So Amgen, in 2015, had the opportunity to basically fix a problem, and I want to describe the problem. So basically, Amgen has around 1,800 scientists in the process development organization. Of those 1,800 scientists, we have about 4,000 instruments that are used within the laboratories across the global sites. We had 5 electronic notebooks, not 2, not 3, but 5. Maybe we would win the competition, maybe 1 of each. We liked a variety of mix. And we had 3 LIMS systems. And we had all of the issues that were problem statements around the labs and the status quo in 2015. So we got here because we had different organizations under different leaderships at different sites that led to different silos and different points in time at which the notebooks and the LIMS systems were acquired. So what we had in 2015 was an opportunity to say, would you design a system like that if you know everything that I had described in the first part of the talk is a reality and an opportunity? And the answer is clearly no. So the question was, what could you do given the opportunity to wipe this paper clean and start again? Especially in an environment where there are now pressures, where we have growing molecular variety, growing complexity of the processes and the analytical methods that we need to develop across a therapeutic pipeline, and an emphasis on speed, therefore catalyzing the opportunity for transformation. And so that's what Amgen did. We took the opportunity and we wanted to transform the process development labs. So one of the things we learned is communication is critical. So we heard yesterday about change management, and we heard about the challenge of introducing technology sometimes to scientists and the resistance to adoption. So what we were able to do is we were able to create a compelling vision, and this is the pictogram of the vision. So where we are today and where we want to be in the future. So today we're where I described with the challenge in 2015. This was the 2015 picture. Where do we want to be? We want to be on the right-hand side. We want to have a connected lab. We want it to be data-driven. We want scientists to have contextualized information, and we want them to be able to seamlessly collaborate and share data and reuse data. So we want a collaborative ecosystem, we want a single solution, and we want the connectivity. And also recognizing from many of the interactions that we'd had with Allotrope is that we also want to take the opportunity to standardize the technology, because it was very evident when we did an analysis of our systems that names were really they were the choice of the scientist because they represented individuality. So to the scientist, how they named their instrument, how they named their sample, how they named their protein was a sign of individuality. And we knew that would be a big change management challenge. So we had to describe the benefits of alignment on the terminology. So then, as we heard yesterday, what you really need to do is you need to say, not that I need an ELN, I need a LIMS system, I need an inventory management system, but I need a set of capabilities. So there were two things that we undertook as part of this project that I wanted to share with you. So the first thing that I wanted to share with you is we had multiple organizations that we were bringing together. We had clinical manufacturing, we had clinical QC, we had formulation sciences, we had attribute sciences, we had chemical process development, biological process development, and formulation. They were all different, they were all special, they all did everything in a different way. They couldn't possibly harmonize and align. We spent 3 months working with the scientists, working with the teams, to take a look at their workflows and their capabilities and the progression across the life cycle of the data. And in doing that, we were able to align on a common set of capabilities that were needed to drive the labs. So we went from disparate to harmonized, but understanding that we would need flexibility to map to workflows. That was a major and critical criteria that we gated moving into then identifying a solution, that we wanted to take the opportunity to harmonize and really find a way that people could work and collaborate together with common workflows and common capabilities. So what we ended up with is we ended up with what we describe as the holistic lab. So why do we call it the holistic lab? Because we wanted people to think about it as being one holistic environment, one set of capabilities that could allow them to complete their execution wherever they were in that data life cycle that was shared yesterday. And when we looked at the marketplace, we recognized that the solution we were looking for couldn't be bought off the shelf today. And in many ways, the reason for that is the fact that many organizations have custom-tailored tools to chemical workflows or biological workflows. Many organizations are organized by chemistry and by biology and by analytical. So we had the opportunity to bring the organizations together and the scientists together. So we wanted to take the opportunity to bring the solution together. So we did an RFP, and then we identified a brave partner in Dassault Systems who was willing to work with us to basically take an agile approach to building this ecosystem and this single solution for process development. And what's important about the way that this is drawn with the hexagons is this is a very modular environment. So it's one environment, it's validated, it can be used across the life cycle of the data. And what we did was, as you can see, we've mapped capabilities around inventory and sample management, around going from an experiment to more of a structured execution in a recipe, a collaborative environment that allows for the request workflow. And we wanted to focus on integration of the instruments so that we could automate the data acquisition and bring the results into the notebook for the scientists to work with. So in putting together this, we also wanted to make sure that we had data integrity by design, and that what we were doing was eliminating wherever possible manual transcription, and we would meet all of the regulations for a compliant system. So this was an opportunity then also to think about the conversations that were taking place within Allotrope. And Allotrope represents an organization that is an example of really working together between industry and vendors to take solutions to common, large problems that to date have not really been solvable, and actually to work together to accelerate the delivery of solutions. And what you'll see is two things on this slide. The first thing that you see is the community. And the community is a combination of multiple companies from biopharmaceutical and crop science area, combination of multiple vendors, large and small, hardware, software, vendors that do both, integrators, and we have a legal umbrella provided by Drinker Biddle and Reith, and we have technical architect Ostas, and Wolfgang is here in the audience today. What I want you to understand about the community when you look at it, no single company has the think tank that sits in the community of Allotrope. And my experience as a contributor and a participant within Allotrope is the value of not being overcome or overwhelmed by that not invented here, that internal group thinking, being able to get outside into the bigger world and actually incorporate some of those ideas into your own strategy actually allows you to have a better strategy and to leverage those learnings and to get ahead of getting the community and your vendors as partners in delivering to that future-proof state. The second thing about Allotrope that addressed many of the challenges that we wanted to address within our project was basically twofold. One is we have low interoperability, high costs of integration, and it takes us time to aggregate data because the formats are different. So let's have a common format. The second thing about Allotrope, which was also aligned with our thinking, was they were working towards the concept of standard vocabularies and leveraging the power of semantics. We knew that was critical, and we really wanted a thought partner and a technology partner in delivering to that. So Allotrope provided us that opportunity. So what you can see is that the combination of the community and the combination of the mission aligned well with what Amgen was trying to achieve. So when you look at the Allotrope framework has really three important components embodied within the ADF. And those components allow you to think about how you want to contextualize your data, even in the absence of the standard vocabulary being available. So the first thing that it provides is that common data format, the ADF. That data format gives you data integrity by design. That data format is available and can be used today to archive and move information across your ecosystem of data and IS infrastructure. Additionally, the ontologies are designed such that the ontologies can be built over time and layered into your data container. So what you have the opportunity to do is you have the opportunity to implement, and then as more of the standardization evolves, to incorporate that within your own data and increase its value over time. The third component is the allotrope data model, which is the only one component that wasn't made commercially available last year. The ADF and the AFO first version were, is the allotrope data model. That will be available before the end of first quarter, and think of that as basically a minimum information standard for your experiment and for your workflow. And so on the right-hand side, you can see the translation of the framework and its concepts into the workflow across the laboratories. So with this in mind, what we wanted to do is make sure that the solution we were delivering to the PD labs was ready for the framework to be implemented. So what this shows you is the partnership that we had with BioVia to become very early implementers of the framework in the commercial product, which is their One Lab Unified Lab Management product. So what you see here is how the framework is being leveraged at every point that we move data from instrument to results in the notebook, and then as we move our data from that ecosystem of holistic lab up into our data lake to connect it with other data. So today, we can use those framework components in our ecosystem and they're in production in commercial software. So then, with the Holistic Lab project, where did we get to? One of the things you said yesterday, Peter, was, well, it's good to have these ideas and the aspirations. The question is, have you actually done it? So this Holistic Lab is in production now across 1,800 scientists in process development. Every new experiment, new piece of data at Amgen is being captured in the Holistic Lab environment. What you can see here is you can see some of those concepts of that holistic solution, the modularity, and then the integration of the concepts of the allotrope framework and some of the standards. So here we have an example of an experiment designed either by a drug substance or drug product scientist. That experiment is then used to create materials, from those materials to create samples that go for analysis. All of the screens that you see here have drop-downs with controlled vocabularies that are leveraging the standard vocabulary. So annotation with metadata is easier for the scientists because it's presented and made available through the drop-downs. In addition to that, what you see here in the top with the attribute sciences is the first step when they get the sample is they want to go and collect the data from the instrument. They scan the instrument, all of the metadata around the instrument is coming into the notebook. So we're building up that full contextualization of the experiment at the moment the scientist starts to use an instrument to measure a result on a sample. And the sample has all of the metadata from the material and from the way that material was made by the process or formulation scientist. So what we're doing is we're building up that metadata richness across the workflow, across the life cycle. And by having an environment where every scientist can see everybody's experiment, then basically we're allowing collaboration, we're allowing experiments not to be repeated when the knowledge is already within the organization, and we're encouraging data sharing. Capturing instrument data and making that available across our global organization in a way that people didn't have to do data verification was one of the business drivers for this project. So within the instrument integration layer, we have different types of integration. So we have the serial devices, we have the file-based devices, and then we have what we call complex adapters like CDS, for example, Empower, Chameleon, and instruments such as the Actor from GE. So all of those instruments across the labs are integrated through IDA so that the results can be directly pulled by the scientist into the notebook. So now they don't have to transcribe the result. It's directly available into the notebook. They don't have to do data verification. They're actually happy about that. So that's one way to make your scientists happy, is to take work out of their day. What's also nice about this is that a scientist in Singapore can make a measurement on a protein material, and a scientist in Thousand Oaks can use that result in near real time. The data is made available roughly every 15 minutes. The data is committed to the data lake when the scientist accepts the result into their notebook as a usable result with the context of the sample. So then, Holistic Lab itself has been a critical component of our digital strategy and enabling that data connectivity of the labs, but it needed to be integrated into an environment that would allow us to extend that connectivity so that we had depth within process development, but we wanted breadth across the organization. So the way we've delivered that is basically Holistic Lab is incorporated into an environment where there's a communication with our data lake. Our data lake is based on Hadoop. As Holistic Lab data goes to data lake and is semantically annotated, at the interface of our external partners or at the interface of our legacy source system, the same semantics and metadata is being applied. So now, even though we have legacy systems, we don't have to do data migration projects. We can just create the data connectivity with the common vocabulary using the semantics. At points in time, we take snapshots of the data to feed the more traditional PLM lifecycle products, but we do that through allowing the data to automatically flow into the data objects within PLM and eliminating the manual transcription steps. So then if you think about your role within the organization, depending on what your role is as a scientist or as a manager or as a product manager, there is access to this data portal and this data ecosystem that allows you to find the information you need, aggregate it very quickly, and it provides the platform to then power the foundation of really next generation analytics, artificial intelligence, aided design, and observation. It's increasing the cognitive capability of our data and feeding simulation and modeling. An example of that connected data flow is here. So I'm a scientist and I'm developing a product. And at Amgen, we talk about the quality target product profile, the target for development to deliver that product that meets the patient's aspirations for that medicine. What you see on the left is the ranges that you have to meet from a process as measured by analytical. What you see on the right is the way that that data is being captured from Holistic Lab in a very structured way, metadata annotated and made available to our data lake. What you see in the middle is the visualization of that data across time and across products and across experiments. So in real time, the scientists can see the entirety of that global data for that molecule, for that quality attribute. And if they double click, they can go to the experiment and they can go to the data associated with that experiment. So they can go broad and they can go deep, all enabled by that connectivity. So what did it take to do this? It took a vision. It took a highly matrix cross-functional team. It took senior executive sponsorship at the very highest level. And it took strategic level vendor partnership. And it took time and it took resources. But what we've achieved is something that allowed us, I believe, to truly transform between 2015 and 2018. And that transformation is not complete, but we've put in a framework and standards that gives us extensibility. And we're closer to that interoperability goal that we had and the plug and play of technology as the technology evolves to meet our business needs and scientific needs. So finally, a connected data ecosystem really allows you to power digital process development, which was our objective and our goal. It allows then differentiated patient-centric innovation. So then we look at that and we look at what used to be a challenge, which is the availability of connectivity and digital in the outside world. We've been able to bring that into the world of the laboratories. And that really allows us to then think about the next phase, which is actually to have the scientists focus on the unknown patterns and actually to have the machines and automation think about the reusable patterns. And then finally, what's the value proposition and what have we been able to achieve? So what I hope I've shown you through this presentation is that realizing the benefits today of a data-centric smart lab powered by the Allotrope framework is possible. What I also hope I've shown you is that that allows and positions you to realize the value opportunities and the aspirations that we have around sharing, around data integrity, around powering innovation, improving scientific reproducibility, and really then thinking about that bright future. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and take questions.